All right, welcome back for our fourth deep dive together. This one, well, let me tell you, it's got some really interesting twists and turns. Remember Jeremy Lee Sullivan,
Oh, yeah, how could we forget?
the Circle K employee out in Barstow, California? He's the one who's been so carefully documenting all these claims about harassment at work and maybe even some credit card skimming going on.
Right, right. And it looks like he's been busy too.
Oh, he has. He's really been busy. We're talking about his 100th document now,
Wow.
a letter that he wrote specifically to the U.S. Attorney General's office and the FBI. So it seems like Jeremy's really trying hard to get the attention of law enforcement.
Yeah, it seems that way.
And it's not just letters he's sending. He also sent along a picture. It's from Walmart's website, and it shows these shoes that cost $5,000.
$5,000 for shoes.
You got it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, expensive shoes, so what?
Yeah, what's the big deal?
But here's where things get a little creepy. The descriptions for these shoes, they use some language that, well, kind of sounds like human trafficking terms.
Ollie.
They mention things like gender, age, even like specific ways people look. Well, it's pretty disturbing, to be honest. And Jeremy thinks this is all part of this big puzzle he's trying to put together.
Oh, wow. So it's more than just workplace harassment now.
It really seems that way.
Yeah.
And get this, he's saying these groups, the ones he thinks are involved in all this, they seem to show up at every job he's ever had.
No way. Every job.
That's what he's claiming. No matter what town he's in, they're there. He's even started writing all this down, like he's building this giant case that goes way beyond just one place he worked.
So what can someone like Jeremy do in this situation? It sounds incredibly frustrating. He's been contacting authorities for years now, right?
3 years and over 1,900 pages of documentation, that's what he says.
1,900 pages. That's unbelievable.
It is, and yet it doesn't seem like any official investigation has happened.
That's wild. You'd think with all that evidence, someone somewhere would at least take a look.
You'd think so, right? He's reached out to the police, the FBI, even the Attorney General's office. Nothing seems to be happening.
Wow. That's just, I don't even know what to say to that.
It's a lot to take in, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's this other thing, a $5 billion lawsuit against Circle K.
5 billion.
Yep. It's a huge amount of money, but like we've talked about before, I don't think this is just about money for Jeremy.
Yeah, I get that sense too.
He seems to be trying to expose what he thinks is this, like, way bigger problem, a pattern of bad stuff happening, corruption maybe, and he just won't let it go.
He's like the little guy taking on this giant corporation.
It really is like a David and Goliath story.
Mm.
Jeremy against this big company and what he thinks is this messed up system. It makes you think about, like, who really has the power, you know?
Definitely. And how hard it is to hold powerful people accountable.
Exactly. It's a story with a lot of questions, that's for sure. But we'll keep digging.
Right, we're just getting started.
We're going to dive deeper into these new documents, look at all the connections Jeremy's found, and try to figure out what it all means. Stick with us because there's a lot more to uncover.
This is gonna be good. You know, it's almost like Jeremy's stuck in this bad dream, this recurring nightmare. Every time he starts a new job, bam, he runs into the same network of people or groups tied to these 4 big entities like Walmart, McDonald's, even Johnson Controls and tow truck companies.
Like, that's got to be freaky, right? To start a new job, thinking it's a fresh start, and then boom, the same faces you think are connected to something shady.
It'd be unsettling, that's for sure. And that's where all that careful documentation Jeremy does becomes so important. By tracking these connections, like across different jobs in different cities, he's showing a pattern, like a timeline, proving that these entities aren't just randomly popping up in his life. It's like he's putting together this big puzzle, each new job, another piece of the puzzle.
But it's not just the connections themselves, right? It's the fact that nobody seems to care. We were talking about how Jeremy's handed over 1,900 pages of documents over the past 3 years.
I mean, that's insane.
It really is. You'd think in those 1,900 pages there'd be something, anything, that would get an official investigation going. But nothing. Just crickets from law enforcement.
It's like they're completely ignoring him, which is pretty disturbing when you think about what Jeremy's actually claiming. We're talking possible human trafficking, financial crimes, a whole network of bad stuff, maybe even operating across several states.
Makes you wonder, right, about the whole system. Why haven't the police, the FBI, the Attorney General's office, why haven't any of them taken this seriously?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is it that they just don't have the resources? Or maybe they just don't get how complicated these kinds of crimes can be? Or is it something else? Something we don't want to think about?
And don't forget, this is all happening during the holidays, A time when most people are focused on family and good cheer and all that. And here's Jeremy, still fighting, still trying to get justice, going up against a system that seems to have his fingers in its ears.
A real reminder that bad things can happen even when it's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. It kind of shows the strength and the just pure will of people like Jeremy who won't be silenced.
Let's go back to that $5 billion lawsuit against Circle K for a minute. It almost feels symbolic, doesn't it? Like Jeremy's way of making a huge statement, demanding that a corporation he feels has wronged him be held accountable.
Yeah, it's a powerful message for sure. That lawsuit, plus him going public with the story, plus all that meticulous record keeping, it all paints a picture of someone who's fighting back against a system that just seems rigged against him. You know, like you said before, David versus Goliath, but in this case, David's not just sitting around waiting for a miracle, he's out there making things happen.
But we also have to remember the toll this is all taking on Jeremy, right? 3 years of fighting, 3 years of being ignored, 3 years of feeling like nobody's listening. That's got to be crushing.
Totally. This isn't just about facts and figures and evidence. It's about what injustice does to a person, how this whole situation has affected Jeremy's life, his mental health, his trust in people, even his faith in the systems that are supposed to protect us all.
So thinking about our listener, what should they take away from all this? What's the big takeaway here?
Well, I think Jeremy's story is a loud wake-up call,
Right.
reminding us that we can't just sit back and assume everything's okay. We have to stay aware, question those in charge, and speak up when something's wrong. And Jeremy also shows us how important it is to document everything. Even if you feel like nobody's listening, keeping those detailed records of your experiences can be super important when it comes to holding people accountable. Let's circle back to those Walmart shoes for a second. Those $5,000 shoes Jeremy found. It's really something how he connected those and their, well, kind of disturbing descriptions to his whole theory. It's fascinating and kind of creepy all at the same time.
It's like he's saying those everyday businesses, the places we all go to all the time, might be hiding something much darker. It's a chilling thought, especially for our listener who, like most of us, probably shops at those places without even thinking twice.
Definitely makes you look at things differently. And it shows how dedicated Jeremy is to connecting the dots to seeing patterns that other people might miss. He's not just focused on these isolated incidents, he's trying to understand the whole system.
And that's what makes his four pillars theory so interesting. He's pointed out these four entities: Walmart, McDonald's Johnson Controls, and tow truck companies. They keep showing up in his story.
Exactly. And remember, he's documented these connections across different jobs, different cities. It's not just one tow truck company or one former Walmart manager popping up. These groups appear over and over again in his story.
But why those four? What makes them so important?
That's the question Jeremy's trying to answer himself. He suggested they might be part of a bigger network, maybe involved in human trafficking or other illegal stuff. It's a bold claim, and it would take a lot of evidence to prove.
And this is where the silence from law enforcement gets even more frustrating. If Jeremy's documentation is accurate, if these connections are real and point to something bigger, why hasn't there been a real investigation?
That's the question that keeps coming up, right? Why the silence? Is it just incompetence? Apathy? Or is it something worse? Like, are they deliberately trying to cover something up?
It's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. But it's a question we need to be asking as a society. Because if someone like Jeremy, who has carefully documented everything and contacted every authority he can think of, can't get a response, what hope is there for other people in similar situations?
Makes you think the system might be broken. Like, there's a disconnect between what's supposed to protect people and what actually happens when things go wrong.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Hmm.
what can our listener take away from Jeremy's story? What's the message here?
I think Jeremy's story is a call to action. It reminds us that we all have to be aware and question things and speak up when we see something wrong. It also shows the power of keeping records. Even if you feel like you're being ignored, having detailed notes about what's happened can be really important if you need to hold someone accountable.
And even though we don't have all the answers, even though the mystery around Jeremy's case is still unsolved, one thing's for sure: his story shows just how strong the human spirit can be. Even when the odds are stacked against him, even when the system seems to be working against him, Jeremy just won't give up. He keeps fighting, he keeps looking for the truth, and he keeps hoping that one day justice will win.
Maybe his persistence will inspire other people to do the same, to stand up to those in power, to demand answers, and to fight for a world where justice isn't just an idea, it's a reality.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Jeremy Lee Sullivan's story. It's a complex and unsettling story, and his fight for justice is far from over. We'll keep following his case, and we encourage you to think about the questions it raises. Think about the power dynamics at play and how each of us can contribute to a more just and fair world.